put my circle back up here, put you back up here, and I'm going to move you out. Because the last illustration is this. Your job description is to move them out of the circle, to move them beyond the circle. You're not simply trying to create a small group where you do life with a few so they think that's where life stops. Your goal is to create an opportunity to put them in a circle so they understand they're part of a bigger story. And from day one, your job is to move them beyond that circle to help them engage with a story that's bigger than just their story, to connect them to the bigger concept of what it means to be the church. At the end of the day, we're going to unpack this even more. But for right now, I just want you to know this. That what this means practically, 3 things. Move them to someone else. Fuller Institute, Baylor, all these research organizations out there will say that a kid who has 3 to 4 to 5 adults in their life during their time in a church, consistent adults, will have a greater chance of having a mobilized faith than kids who don't. In other words, you put other adults in their life besides just you. This isn't about connecting them just to you. This is about connecting them to other adults as well. This is why it's so important to organize your groups in a way that when you divide and when you grow, there's a leader who's with the kids in an apprentice kind of model where that leader can go with a group of kids. And if you get upset sometimes because there's another leader your kids are getting connected to and they're moving past you, then just get over it. Because it's not about you. It's about discipling kids to understand how to be connected. And the more adults you connect them, the bigger you're going to create their concept of who God is, because they're going to be connected and seeing God through the prism of other adults as well. That's why it's important to send them to a mission trip with another adult. That's why it's important to reach in and to find other adults in their family or other adults in their life and connect them to those adults, to move them to someone else and to move them to be the church. To understand that their mission is not what happens in the circle. Their mission is what happens outside the circle. That's why in the teenage years, and we're going to dig into this deeper, but that's why in the teenage years it is essential for kids to have opportunities to do ministry as a group with their leaders that's bigger than just their local church. You want to move them to be the church, to understand what it means to be the church, so that while they're with you, they experience ministry, so that one day when they're not with you, that's in their DNA, and they've experienced what God can do through them, and they understand, by the way, I'll talk about that later, never mind. End of the day. Move them to what's next. If I had time, we would unpack what it means to walk with them relationally through transitions. A lady asked me earlier, what do you do, to make sure that kids don't lose their faith before they walk away, and how do you carry them through transitions? The best way to carry kids through transitions is to think in terms of the critical transitions and what relationships are in their life and in place. If I had time today, we would spend at least an hour talking only about this one issue, what we do with 11th grade to the first year of college. Because that's where the dropout rate happens. And if we're not connecting people relationally to people who stay in their life over and through that window, we're setting kids up to get disconnected at the time that's most critical. The reason I say that is because I have kids who come up to me who will say, I never felt more abandoned by my church than I did on graduation Sunday. Because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to connect. And the relationships I had in place were gone. And the church just kind of assumed that now I'm a 12th grader, I've graduated from high school, so I'm an adult. There's not a sociologist or a psychologist or any research entity in the country that will tell you a kid is an adult at 18 or 19. They're transitioning. And we're taking the relationships away from them at the time they need them the most. I could give you 4 or 5 principles related to this. You just got to understand, we've got to set them up for the long haul. Because here's the deal. From the time they show up in your world, they're packing their bags. I was talking to a couple of young parents this last week who have newborns. And we just did this blog on Orange Parents. You ought to go read the blog. It's called about holding on and letting go. From the time your children are born, they're packing their bags. Just got to know it, and it's going to happen fast. From the time they show up in your ministry, and you have them for just a little bit of time, you're packing their bag. And what they carry with them into adulthood, you have the opportunity to influence. So what are you going to help them pack? What are you going to help them put in the bag? You with me on this? I mean, just understand. I have 4 children, 27, 25, 24, and 27, 25, 23, and 21. It's an odd year, I remember this. When Hannah, my oldest, moved out of the house, it snuck up on me. I showed up one afternoon. Debbie said, she's packed up and she's gone. I'm saying, what do you mean? Oh, she moved today. I ran downstairs to the basement. It looked like a tornado had hit the basement. Stuff was everywhere. And I'm sitting there sorting through, well, why did she take what she took and why did she leave what she left? My middle daughter came down. We were both emotional. I mean, it was just this emotional moment. It's not like Hannah hasn't warned me. I mean, she's been saying since she was in the 5th grade, I'm going to move away one day, Dad. So, I mean, I knew it was coming. And Sarah's standing there next to me, and she's crying, and I'm crying, and then I realize she's crying for an entirely different reason. She's like, Dad, she took all the curling irons. You know what I really, in my mind, prayed for that week more than anything else? That God would put other adults in her life at this next stage and phase of her life as a young college-age person who would speak into her world like other adults have spoken into her world during her teenage years, who said things that I couldn't say. It's interesting. There are moments I'd ride down the road with Hannah or Reggie Paul or my kids, and they would say, oh, you know what? Clay said this today in our small group, and Jared said this, and I'd be going, I've been saying that for 16 years. But it was somebody else, another voice. Here's the point. What we've just talked about, you can't do for many. You can't be present for a lot of people. That's called Facebook, and you're not really being present. You can't create a safe place for hundreds, but you can for a few. You can't partner with everybody's family, but you can for a few. You can't model up close and personal for everyone, but you can for a few. And you can't move someone to what's next and be personally involved with packing their bags with hundreds of kids, but you can for a few.